The eighth wolf appeared on the coldest night Greyhaven had seen in 20 years. Elara Moss had one pot of stew left. Half was supposed to last until morning, the rest she poured into 7 chipped bowls beneath the broken roof of Northwatch Way Station, where 7 starving wolves waited beyond the snow. Then something enormous moved between the trees. A black wolf stepped into the moonlight. It was larger than the others, scarred across one shoulder, its silver-gray eyes fixed on Elara with an intelligence that made her uneasy. 2 border guards watching from the road laughed. "That one will eat you, Omega." Elara glanced at the wooden spoon in her hand. "Then he'll be disappointed. I barely have enough meat for myself." Neither guard came closer. Everyone in Greyhaven feared the wolves now. 3 villages had been attacked. Livestock had disappeared. Royal hunters claimed the sacred pack had turned feral. Elara did not believe it. For 6 weeks, these wolves had returned her hungry, exhausted, and half-frozen. They never attacked her. She placed the final bowl in the snow. The black wolf approached. Every muscle in Elara's body tightened. But instead of eating, he pushed the bowl toward a trembling young female curled beneath the fence. Elara stopped breathing. A starving alpha should have eaten first. This one had chosen the weakest. Then, every wolf suddenly lifted its head toward the distant mountain road. Someone was coming. And hidden beneath the black wolf's scarred body was Alpha King Caelan Thorn, the missing ruler of Greyhaven, secretly watching a conspiracy that was about to turn his own kingdom against the creatures it had sworn to protect. By morning, the storm had buried half of Northwatch Way Station beneath fresh snow. Elara woke before sunrise to the sound of claws scraping softly against frozen earth. For one confused moment, she thought someone was knocking. Then she remembered. The wolves. She pulled on her boots, wrapped a wool shawl around her shoulders, and opened the back door. 7 wolves rested beneath the collapsed shelter roof. The black one was gone. Elara frowned. He had stayed awake most of the night, watching the northern road as if he expected someone to come down from the mountains. Now only his tracks remained, disappearing into the white forest. She stared after them. "You're welcome for dinner," she muttered. One gray wolf lifted its head. Elara sighed. "Yes, I know. I complain too much." AD. She carried out another bucket of warm water. Her food stores were almost empty. 2 sacks of barley remained beside the stove. A few dried onions hung from the rafters. The last strip of smoked venison would not survive another week if she kept sharing meals with 8 wolves. Still, when the smallest female struggled to stand, Elara broke the venison in half. She had known hunger before. She knew what it looked like when a living creature stopped expecting tomorrow. She would not watch that happen if she could prevent it. Later that morning, Elara walked toward the nearest village with an empty grain sack over her shoulder. The road was busy despite the cold. Farmers repaired fences damaged during the storm. Merchants cleared snow from their carts. Royal hunt notices had been nailed to almost every post. Danger. Wolf activity increasing. Do not feed or approach. Report all sightings. Someone had drawn teeth beneath the warning. Someone else had written monsters across the bottom. Elara stopped. She read the notice twice. "Increasing where?" she whispered. The wolves near Northwatch had never crossed the fence toward her house. They had never chased travelers. They had never even growled, unless royal hunt patrols approached. That last thought made her pause. Talking to yourself again? Elara turned. 2 guards stood outside the grain shop. One was the same young man who had laughed at her the night before. His name was Tommen. He was broad-shouldered, 25 at most, and always seemed proud of wearing a sword he had never needed to use. His partner grinned. Maybe she's discussing politics with the wolves now. Elara adjusted the empty sack on her shoulder. They listened better than most officials. Tommen snorted. "You'll get yourself killed one morning. Possibly. And we'll have to recover the body." "That sounds inconvenient." "It is." "Then perhaps you should stop frightening me." His partner laughed before quickly pretending to cough. Tommen tried not to smile. He failed. For a few seconds, the warning notices seemed less frightening. Then his expression changed. "You really shouldn't feed them, Elara." She studied him. Why? The hunt says they're becoming aggressive. They don't act aggressive. You're not a ranger. No. You're not a tracker. My father was. That was years ago. Elara looked toward the mountains. Her father had spent 37 years maintaining the old migration paths. He had known every stream, every resting ground, every marker stone from Moonpine to the Southern River. Then the Royal Hunt modernized the system. New maps, new patrol roads, new officers trained in the capital. Men like her father were told their knowledge was outdated. 3 years later, he died still insisting that mountains did not care how modern a map looked. Elara entered the grain shop without answering. By noon she was back at Northwatch with less food than she needed and more questions than she wanted. The wolves were sleeping. The black one had returned. He stood near the broken fence, watching her. Elara dropped the grain sack beside the door. You disappear all morning and return exactly when the work is finished. His ears moved. That is suspiciously noble behavior. The wolf stared. Elara almost laughed. Then she noticed mud on his paws. Not white mountain clay. Dark red earth. She crouched. Red soil existed along only one abandoned route near Northwatch. The Old North Pass. Her smile disappeared. That pass had been closed 18 years earlier. No wolf should have been using it. Elara went inside and pulled an old wooden box from beneath her bed. Inside lay her father's maps. The paper smelled of dust, cedar oil, and another life. She spread one across the table. Moonpine Valley. Northwatch. Old North Pass. Winter Route. Her finger followed the faded line. According to the map, wolves migrating south should have turned east long before reaching her way station. Instead, the pack had somehow continued west. Straight toward farms. Straight toward villages. Straight toward people already frightened enough to demand their deaths. Elara looked through the window. The black wolf was still watching her. All right, she whispered. Show me where you came from. An hour later, she followed his tracks through knee-deep snow. The old maintenance path climbed behind Northwatch and disappeared between ancient pines. Most people no longer knew it existed. Elara did. Her father had brought her here as a child. Count the stones, he used to say. Mountains forget roads. Stones remember. She reached marker 12 before sunset, then stopped. The ancient granite pillar leaned beside the trail, half covered in moss and snow. Something was wrong. Elara brushed the ice away. A carved arrow pointed west. Toward Northwatch. Toward the villages. Her heartbeat quickened. She walked around the stone. Thick green lichen covered its eastern face. But lichen grew where years of shade protected it. If the marker had always pointed west, the growth should have been on the opposite side. Elara slowly stood. Someone had turned the stone. Not last winter. Not by accident. Recently. Behind her, snow shifted. The black wolf stepped from between the trees. Elara looked from him to the false arrow. Then back again. You didn't lose your way. The wolf remained perfectly still. Elara's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone changed it. Far above them, hidden beyond the ridge, a royal hunt rider watched through the trees. He saw Elara touch the marker. He saw the black wolf beside her. Then he quietly turned his horse toward Greyhaven. Because Elara Moss had just discovered something she had never been meant to notice. The rider disappeared before Elara noticed him. By the time she left marker 12, the light had already begun fading behind the mountains. The black wolf followed several steps behind her. He never came too close. He never wandered far. Elara found that unsettling. Most wild wolves either avoided humans or tested their boundaries. This one behaved differently. He watched the forest, the trail, even the sky with the patience of someone measuring danger. She stopped once and looked over her shoulder. You know something. The wolf stared back. That was not a question. He blinked slowly. Elara hid. Wonderful. I am losing arguments to wildlife now. They continued toward Northwatch. What Elara did not know was that the animal behind her understood every word. Alpha King Caelan Thorn had spent 12 days inside his wolf form. He had chosen to leave Greyhaven quietly after 3 official reports claimed sacred wolves were abandoning Moonpine because of hunger. The explanation had sounded reasonable. That was precisely why he distrusted it. For centuries, severe winters had come and gone. The wolves adapted. They changed hunting grounds. They followed deer farther south. They did not suddenly walk directly toward villages. Then 3 attacks occurred within 6 weeks. Silas Wren, master of the Royal Hunt, had recommended an emergency review of the Sacred Migration Protection Act. Caelan refused. Not because he believed Silas was lying. Because something in the numbers bothered him. The attacks happened too evenly apart. Different villages. Similar times. Almost identical descriptions. Caelan had learned on battlefields that chaos rarely repeated itself so neatly. So he told the palace he was inspecting southern defenses. Instead, he shifted beyond Moonpine and followed the wolves himself. He expected to find hunger. Perhaps disease. Perhaps a new predator pushing them from their territory. What he found was confusion. Wolf trails crossed themselves. Packs separated without reason. Animals followed valleys they had ignored for generations. Then, 4 days into his investigation, the mountain trail collapsed beneath him. A buried support rope had been cut. Caelan fell nearly 40 feet into a ravine. His horse fled. His royal seal vanished beneath the snow. A deep gash opened across his shoulder. He survived because he landed in wolf form. Returning immediately to Greyhaven would have been easy once he recovered enough strength. But someone had prepared that trap. Someone knew those trails mattered. If Caelan returned publicly and summoned Silas, every manipulated marker could disappear before sunrise. So he stayed among the wolves. And eventually, they led him to Elara Moss. At first, she looked suspicious. Too convenient. 8 displaced wolves had somehow chosen the same poor Omega living beside an abandoned route. Caelan had watched her for days, searching for signs of scent bait, hidden commands, secret messengers. He found none. She had barely enough food for herself. She carried no hunting resin. She never tried to touch the wolves unless one approached first. Most importantly, she never favored him. That offended a very small, very unreasonable part of his pride. The night before, she had given the fattest piece of meat to a trembling female while telling Caelan he was large enough to survive disappointment. No one had spoken to him that way in 20 years. He almost admired it. Almost. When they reached Northwatch, 3 mounted Royal Hunt officers were waiting. Elara slowed. The wolves stopped behind her. The lead ranger raised one gloved hand. Elara Moss. Yes. We received reports that you are feeding aggressive animals near civilian roads. Elara looked around. The wolves were sitting quietly in the snow. One of us appears confused about the word aggressive. The younger officer avoided smiling. The leader did not. You are interfering with wildlife containment. I am giving hungry animals food. You are attracting them here. That accusation struck differently. Caelan watched Elara carefully. For the first time, doubt crossed her face. Could she be making things worse? The ranger saw it. You think you're helping. Maybe you're teaching them to associate people with food. Elara looked toward the wolves. It was a reasonable argument. That was what made it dangerous. I'll stop feeding them near the road, she said. But that doesn't explain why they came here in the first place. The ranger's expression hardened. That is not your concern. Elara reached inside her coat. Caelan tensed. She pulled out a rubbing she had taken from Marker 12. I found this on the old pass. The 3 officers became still. Only for a second. But Caelan saw it. Soldiers train themselves to hide fear. They rarely hid surprise quickly enough. The lead ranger took the paper. Old stones move. Granite pillars do not turn themselves around. Snow shifts foundations. The lichen says otherwise. Silence. The ranger folded the rubbing, then tucked it into his coat. This route is restricted. Marker 12 is outside the restricted boundary. You should stay away anyway. Elara's eyes narrowed. Why? For your safety. He turned toward the others. Record the animals. The younger ranger opened a leather ledger. Caelan listened. 8 hostile wolves gathered at civilian residence, the officer dictated. Elara stared at him. Hostile? The wolves had not moved. One was asleep. Another was licking snow from its paw. Caelan felt something cold settle beneath his ribs. The young ranger hesitated. They don't look hostile, sir. The lead officer looked at him. Right what I said. The boy obeyed. Caelan no longer watched Elara. He watched the ledger. For months, reports like that had reached his throne. Reports he had trusted. Reports used to justify emergency measures against Moonpine. Elara stepped closer. You're writing something that isn't happening. The ranger mounted his horse. You should worry less about reports and more about surviving winter. They rode away. Elara stood silently until the hoofbeats disappeared. Then she looked at the black wolf. Well? Caelan remained still. If you're planning to eat me, wait until after breakfast. I hate leaving chores unfinished. Despite everything, something almost like amusement moved through him. Then his gaze shifted toward the disappearing riders. For the first time, Caelan Thorn stopped asking whether Elara Moss was part of the mystery. He began wondering whether the reports reaching his throne had ever told him the truth at all. The patrol disappeared beyond the trees, but the lie they left behind stayed with Elara. 8 hostile wolves. She kept hearing the words. One of the wolves had fallen asleep during the inspection. Another had spent most of the encounter trying to pull frozen grass from beneath the snow. Yet somewhere in Greyhaven, those animals would now exist on paper as a threat. Elara stood outside Northwatch until the cold finally forced her inside. The black wolf remained near the fence. You heard them, she said quietly. Apparently you are terrifying. His silver-gray eyes stayed on her. Elara looked at the smallest female curled beside the woodpile. Try harder. The following afternoon, the weather changed. Gray clouds rolled across Moonpine so quickly that daylight vanished beneath them. Wind struck the way station in sudden violent bursts. Snow began falling sideways. Elara knew mountain storms. This one was dangerous. She hurried outside. The wolves had gathered beneath the broken shelter, but the old roof was already groaning beneath fresh snow. Elara opened the storage shed beside the house. It was small, dark, and filled with old tools, but the walls were thick. Come inside. None of the wolves moved. Of course they didn't. Wild animals did not understand invitations. And frightened animals understood traps very well. Elara stepped away from the doorway. She placed 2 bowls of food just inside. Then she returned to the house. No ropes. No commands. No attempt to push them. The choice remained theirs. The storm grew worse. Nearly an hour passed before the injured gray female approached the shed. She stopped at the threshold. Elara watched through the kitchen window. The wolf sniffed the wooden floor. One paw entered. Then another. Nothing happened. She went inside. A younger wolf followed. Then 2 more. The black wolf remained outside. Snow gathered across his back. Elara opened the kitchen door. You are either very brave or extremely stubborn. Caelan looked toward the shed. 3 wolves were still outside with him. He could have entered first. He did not. He waited until each weaker animal had crossed the threshold. Only then did he follow. Elara noticed. Again. The largest wolf always ate last, entered shelter last, positioned himself nearest danger. She knew pack behavior well enough to understand leadership. But there was something more deliberate in him. Something almost human. By evening, the worst of the storm had passed. That was when another royal hunt patrol appeared. Only 2 riders this time. The younger man from the previous day was among them. His name, Elara finally remembered, was Daniel. The older ranger beside him looked deeply unhappy to be there. We were ordered to confirm the pack remained at Northwatch, Daniel said. They do. Outside? Elara pointed toward the shed. The older ranger immediately reached for his crossbow. You put them inside? I opened a door. You brought wolves into a building. They brought themselves. The ranger stepped backward. His boot struck a patch of ice. He slipped. The crossbow jerked upward. The wolves reacted instantly. 7 bodies surged from the shed. Elara froze. Daniel shouted. The older ranger raised the weapon. But the wolves did not attack. They formed a wall between Elara and the crossbow. The black wolf stood at the center. His lips lifted slightly. Not enough to expose his teeth fully. Just enough. The ranger stopped breathing. Elara slowly stepped forward. Lower it. They're threatening me. No. You pointed a weapon at me. I slipped. They don't know that. The man's hands trembled. Daniel reached over and gently pushed the crossbow downward. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Then Elara crouched. She did not touch the wolves. She simply spoke. It's all right. The injured female looked back at her. Elara waited. One wolf stepped aside. Then another. The black wolf remained in place longest. Finally, he moved. Daniel stared at them. They listened to you. No. Elara shook her head. They decided I wasn't afraid of them. Caelan heard the difference. So did Daniel. The older ranger lowered his crossbow completely. His face had gone pale. We should leave. Daniel remained where he was. His eyes moved across the animals. They were reported as aggressive. Elara looked at him. You saw yesterday what they were doing. Daniel's jaw tightened. I wrote what I was ordered to write. And today? He had no answer. The question hung between them. Caelan studied the young ranger carefully. There was shame in the man's scent. Not guilt. That mattered. Daniel was frightened of someone. The two hunters eventually mounted their horses. Before leaving, Daniel glanced back. For the first time, he looked at the wolves not as animals marked for destruction, but as evidence. That night, Elara checked the shed after the storm. The wolves were sleeping. Caelan remained awake. Again. She brought him a bowl. He ignored it. What now? His head turned sharply toward her boots. Elara frowned. Then she smelled it. A strange sweetness clung to the leather. Not food. Not pine. Something richer. Musky. Artificial. Every sleeping wolf lifted its head at the same moment. Their eyes fixed on her feet. Elara slowly stepped backward. The black wolf rose. A low growl formed in his chest. Not at her. At the scent. Elara remembered where she had walked that afternoon. The ranger had stumbled against her. His boot had brushed hers. Her stomach tightened. She scraped a trace of the substance from the leather with a knife. The smell grew stronger. Instantly, the wolves became restless. Elara stared at the residue. She had smelled it once before. Years ago. Inside her father's hunting supply chest. Prey lore. Royal grade scent resin. Her eyes lifted toward the dark mountain road. The wolves had not become dangerous when the hunters arrived. They had reacted to something the hunters were carrying. And for the first time, Elara understood that the false reports might not be the beginning of the deception. They might only be covering something much older. The scent remained on Elara's knife long after she scraped it from her boot. Sweet. Musky. Wrong. The wolves paced inside the storage shed while the storm faded beyond the walls. Their bodies were no longer relaxed. Ears lifted. Noses worked the air. Ing, 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 ing. The younger ones moved toward the door as if something outside were calling them. Elara immediately wrapped the knife in cloth. The reaction stopped slowly. Not all at once. First the smallest female settled. Then another wolf lowered its head. Only the black wolf remained standing. His silver-gray eyes stayed fixed on the bundle in Elara's hand. You know what this is too, don't you? Caelan did. Royal hunting resin. He had approved its limited use years earlier. Hunters applied it to false trails when dangerous predators needed to be drawn away from villages. The resin mimicked the scent of wounded prey and could pull hungry animals across surprising distances. It was tightly controlled. Or it was supposed to be. Caelan felt anger rise beneath his ribs. The ranger's boot had carried enough resin to disturb an entire pack. That was not accidental contact. Someone in the royal hunt had been handling it recently. Elara went inside and searched through her father's old belongings until she found a narrow field journal tied with faded cord. She opened it beside the stove. Most pages contained weather notes, sketches of river crossings, or complaints about broken equipment. Then she found what she remembered. A drawing of 3 small jars. Prey lure, predator deterrent, trail neutralizer. Her father had written a warning beneath the first. Never use near migration routes. Hungry packs may follow until exhausted. Elara read the sentence twice. Her pulse quickened. The wolves outside had arrived half-starved. Exhausted. Confused. They had followed the wrong route directly toward settlements. She looked toward the wrapped knife. Then toward marker 12 in the mountains. By dawn, she had made her decision. She packed bread, rope, her father's journal, and the smallest sample of resin inside a sealed tin. The black wolf waited near the path. Elara pointed at him. "You are not coming." He walked past her. She closed her eyes. That was unusually clear disobedience. Caelan continued uphill. Elara followed. The climb toward marker 12 took nearly 2 hours. Fresh snow had covered most tracks, but the old stone still pointed west. Elara knelt beside it. She searched the base carefully. Nothing. Then Caelan began digging several feet away. His claws tore through snow and frozen leaves. Elara stared. "What did you find?" He dug deeper. A small strip of dark cloth emerged beneath the roots. Elara pulled it free. Something sticky coated the fabric. She opened the tin containing the sample from her boot and compared the scent. Identical. Her stomach dropped. The resin had not simply been carried here by passing hunters. It had been planted beside the trail. Deliberately. Elara looked at the black wolf. If someone wanted wolves to follow this path. She glanced west. The route led directly toward Northwatch. Then, beyond it, toward farms. They could make it look like you chose the villages. Caelan's ears flattened. At last, the pattern was beginning to take shape. False markers created direction. Resin created desire. Hunger did the rest. But one question remained. Who had access to enough royal resin to manipulate miles of migration territory? They moved farther up the old path. At marker 14, Elara found another cloth strip. At marker 15, she found scratches around the stone where tools had recently disturbed the frozen earth. By the third discovery, coincidence was dead. Someone had constructed a road the wolves could smell but humans could not see. A trap made from instinct. On their way back, voices carried through the trees. Elara immediately crouched behind a fallen pine. Caelan lowered himself beside her. 2 royal hunt officers stood farther down the slope. A captain spoke first. "Wren wants the western incidents recorded before sundown." The younger ranger beside him frowned. "There was no incident at Northwatch yesterday." The captain's face hardened. There were wolves beside a civilian residence. They were sleeping. "Write what you were ordered to write." The younger man hesitated. "What if the king asks?" The captain looked around sharply, then lowered his voice. "The king reads summaries. Master Wren decides what reaches him." FD. Caelan became perfectly still. Elara felt the black wolf's body change beside her. Not movement. Tension. The captain continued. "And stop asking questions about the old markers." "Why?" "Because men who enjoy employment learn the difference between curiosity and stupidity." The 2 hunters moved away. Elara remained hidden until their voices disappeared. Then she slowly stood. "Wren." The black wolf looked at her. She knew the name. Everyone in Greyhaven did. Silas Wren, master of the royal hunt. The man responsible for protecting Moonpine. The same office that controlled the resin. The same office reporting that the wolves had become dangerous. Alara's hand tightened around her father's journal. For the first time, the problem no longer looked like neglect. It looked organized. But she still did not know why. Why would the man responsible for protecting Greyhaven's wolves deliberately drive them toward frightened people? The answer came later that afternoon. At the village notice board, a new proclamation had been nailed beneath the wolf warnings. Elara pushed through the small crowd and read it. Emergency review of the Sacred Migration Protection Act. Public hearing in 7 days. If the wolves were declared a continuing threat, Moonpine Valley could lose its protected status. Elara stared at the words. Beside her, an elderly farmer whispered, "About time. That land could feed half the north if the crown opened it." Another man answered, "Not just farmland. Merchants say there's silverstone beneath those hills." Elara slowly turned toward the distant forest. Land. Timber. Silverstone. The wolves were standing between someone and a fortune. And suddenly, she understood something far more frightening than a false report. Someone did not need the wolves to die secretly. They needed Greyhaven to ask for their deaths. 7 days before the public hearing, fear had already made its decision. By noon, every bench inside the Greyhaven village hall was full. Farmers stood along the walls, with snow still melting from their boots. Merchants crowded near the front. Mothers held children close whenever someone mentioned the wolves. Royal hunt officers remained beside the doors, quiet and watchful. Elara sat near the back. The black wolf waited outside. He had followed her all the way from Northwatch, then stopped beneath a cedar tree where no frightened villager could accuse him of threatening anyone. Still, people had noticed him. Whispers moved through the hall. "That's one of them. The Omega feeds it. She's the reason they keep coming down." Elara kept her eyes forward. She had learned long ago that defending yourself against every whisper only gave the whisper more importance. At the front of the hall, a clerk unrolled the proposed emergency amendment. His voice was careful. If the Greyhaven wolves are formally classified as a continuing threat to civilian settlements, temporary protections over Moonpine Valley may be suspended. A farmer raised his hand. "For how long?" "Until the threat is contained." Another man spoke. "And what happens to the land?" The clerk hesitated. "That would be decided by the crown." A merchant representative stood before anyone else could respond. His coat was far too expensive for the village. Moonpine has remained untouched for generations. If the wolves can no longer use it safely, Greyhaven should consider whether the land might serve another purpose. Elara looked at him. He smiled gently. Too gently. "Timber," he continued. "Grazing. Perhaps mining. New roads could bring work to the northern villages." Several people murmured approval. A woman near Elara whispered, "My sons need work." That was the danger. Silas's plan was not built entirely on greed. It was built on real desperation. Families were struggling. Livestock had been lost. Winter had been cruel. If someone offered safety and prosperity together, frightened people might never ask what price had been hidden underneath. An elderly shepherd stood. "My brother was attacked outside Thornfield." The room went silent. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't lying. Those wolves nearly killed him. Elara lowered her eyes. This was why she could not simply stand and say the animals were innocent. People had been hurt. The attacks were real. Only the cause had been manipulated. The shepherd pointed toward the window. "You feed them. Would you feed them if they had torn apart your family?" Elara felt every eye turn toward her. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stood. "I don't know." The answer surprised the room. The merchant representative smiled faintly. Elara continued. "If one had hurt someone I loved, I would probably be angry. I would probably be afraid." She looked toward the shepherd. "You have every right to be both." His expression softened slightly. "But fear tells us what we feel," Elara said. "It does not always tell us what happened." The room became quieter. A royal hunt officer shifted near the doorway. Elara noticed. She reached into her coat. Several people tensed. She removed the strip of dark cloth found beneath marker 12. This was buried beside an old migration stone. She placed it on the table. It carried royal prelure. The clerk frowned. The merchant representative stopped smiling. Elara continued. I found the same resin beside 3 separate markers. Those stones had been turned toward the settlements. Someone laughed nervously. A stone doesn't make a wolf attack. No, Elara said. Hunger does, confusion does, a scent telling an animal that prey is waiting ahead does. The shepherd stared at the cloth. You're saying someone led them toward us? I'm saying we should find out before we kill them. The hall erupted. Question. Arguments. Angry voices. One farmer demanded proof. Another called the claim impossible. A woman asked why the royal hunt would ever do such a thing. Elara did not answer that question. Not yet. She did not have enough evidence. Outside, Caelan listened through the wall. Every word tightened something inside him. This was his kingdom. These frightened people trusted systems he had created. They believed official reports because he had taught them those reports represented order. And somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking who controlled the information before it reached him. Silas had not stolen authority. Caelan had concentrated it in one place and handed it to him. That truth hurt more than betrayal. The meeting continued for another hour. Before it ended, the merchant representative introduced one final document. A preliminary development proposal. Moonpine Valley. Eastern Access Road. Selective timber rights. Silverstone Survey authorization. Elara stared at the signatures. One name appeared repeatedly. Eastmere Merchant Consortium. At the bottom was a note. Pending suspension of sacred migration protections. Now the motive had a shape. Not hatred of wolves. Money. Control. Land. Outside the hall, snow had begun falling again. Elara walked toward the cedar tree. The black wolf stepped from beneath it. She sat on the stone wall beside him. For once, she did not speak immediately. Then she looked toward Moonpine. People are scared. Caelan sat beside her. And scared people deserve protection too. His ears moved. Elara rubbed her hands together for warmth. But killing something because we are afraid of it? She shook her head. Being afraid of something does not mean we understand it. Caelan lowered his head. The words settled deeper than she knew. Elara looked at him. You agree with me suspiciously often for a wolf. He remained silent. Very wise. For a moment, neither moved. Then hoofbeats sounded from the northern road. A royal hunt messenger rode past without stopping. He carried a black leather dispatch case marked with Silas Wren's seal. By nightfall, that message reached Greyhaven. Silas read the report alone. Elara Moss had found the resin. She had shown it publicly. She had connected the wolves to the Moonpine hearing. For the first time that winter, Silas Wren stopped thinking of the poor Omega at Northwatch as harmless. He folded the report carefully, then called for 2 men he trusted. Bring me her maps, he said. And if she refuses? Silas looked toward the dark forest beyond his window. She won't be given that choice. The 2 men reached Northwatch before sunrise. Elara heard the horses first, not the slow rhythm of travelers passing toward the village. These riders stopped directly outside her door. The wolves were already awake. The black one stood beside the fence, his body rigid, silver-gray eyes fixed on the road. Elara pulled on her coat and stepped outside. 3 royal hunt officers waited in the snow. The man in front carried a folded order sealed with Silas Wren's mark. Elara Moss? You already know. His mouth tightened. By authority of the royal hunt, all maps, journals, trail records, and materials related to Moonpine are to be surrendered for inspection. Elara stared at him. Inspection by whom? Master Wren's office. That answered enough. Her father's journals were inside. So were the marker rubbings. The resin sample. Everything Silas would want erased. Elara folded her arms. Do you have a crown warrant? The officer stepped closer. We have sufficient authority. No. His eyes narrowed. No? You have an order from the man I believe may be involved in the thing you are confiscating evidence about. Behind her, the wolves began moving. The officer noticed. Control them. Elara looked back. They are wild wolves. Then perhaps you should not have trained them to gather here. The accusation was deliberate now, not uncertainty. A story being prepared. Before Elara could answer, another rider appeared through the trees. Daniel, the young ranger from the previous patrol, reined in hard. Captain, the lead officer turned. You were not assigned here. Daniel looked toward Elara, then toward the black wolf. Something changed in his face. Caelan saw it immediately. Recognition. Not complete certainty, but enough. Years earlier, Daniel had served briefly in the Outer Palace Guard. He had seen the Alpha King shift during a military ceremony. The scar over Caelan's left shoulder had been unmistakable even beneath fur. Daniel's hand slowly dropped from his reins. "My king," he whispered. The other officers did not hear. Elara did. She frowned. "What?" Daniel recovered quickly. "Nothing." But Caelan stepped forward. Not like an animal defending food, like a ruler approaching a soldier. He stopped directly in front of Daniel, held his gaze, then lowered his head once. A command. Daniel went pale. The captain snapped, "Move that beast." Daniel did not. Instead, he looked at the confiscation order. "Sir, this document doesn't authorize seizure of private family records." The captain stared at him. "You're questioning Master Wren?" "I'm reading the order." The silence sharpened. Elara understood immediately. Daniel had chosen a side. The captain reached for the papers inside Elara's coat. Caelan growled. Every wolf rose. No attack. No chaos. Only warning. Daniel stepped between them. "I suggest we leave." The captain's face burned with anger. But 8 wolves now watched him. He backed toward his horse. "This isn't finished." Elara answered softly. "I assumed not." When the riders disappeared, Daniel remained. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Elara looked at him. "You called him something." Daniel's eyes went to Caelan. Caelan gave the smallest warning growl. Daniel swallowed. "I said nothing important." That is becoming a popular phrase around here. He almost smiled. Then his expression turned serious. "You need to move the evidence." "Where?" "Anywhere Master Wren won't search first." Elara looked toward the mountains. Her father had once hidden emergency maps inside an old survey cabin beyond Marker 17. Inside restricted Moonpine. She hated the idea immediately, which meant it was probably the safest one. By midday, Elara packed the journals into oilcloth. Daniel rode ahead to delay patrols. Caelan followed her toward Old North Pass. The wind had risen again. At Marker 17, Elara stopped. The carved boundary symbol showed clearly beneath the snow. Beyond this point, she no longer had legal access. She stared at it. Caelan waited. "You know this is exactly how sensible people end up arrested." The wolf tilted his head. "Yes, I know. You are not sensible people." She stepped across. They had traveled less than a mile when they heard howling above them. Not ordinary communication. Panic. Elara looked up. Several wolves were trapped on a narrow ledge where fresh snow had collapsed across the old route. Below them, the mountain dropped sharply into a ravine. Someone had removed the northern marker. Without it, the pack had followed the wrong bend. Again. Elara forgot about legality. She climbed. Caelan stayed beside her. The missing marker lay half-buried farther down the slope. Together they reached it before dusk. Elara dug around the base with numb hands, pulled the heavy stone upright, and turned its arrow toward the safe northern trail. The effort split the skin across her palm. Blood stained the snow. Caelan immediately moved toward her. "I'm fine." He stared at her hand. "I said fine, not intelligent." That night they sheltered inside the abandoned survey cabin. The rescued wolves slept nearby. Elara wrapped her palm with cloth. Caelan lay beside the doorway, refusing to sleep. She watched him for a long time. "You could leave, you know." He remained still. "You don't owe me anything." His silver-gray eyes lifted. Elara smiled faintly. "Still staying?" He moved closer and settled beside her chair. Something warm and painful touched her chest. She believed he was guarding the pack. She did not understand that Caelan Thorn had already made a decision far more dangerous. For the first time since his investigation began, protecting the truth was no longer enough. He intended to protect her too. Elara reached down but stopped before touching his fur. Then she whispered the question that had been growing inside her for weeks. "You are not an ordinary wolf, are you?" Caelan's eyes opened. And this time, he did not look away. Caelan did not answer Elara's question. He only held her gaze for one long moment before turning toward the cabin door. Outside, the rescued wolves were restless again. Not frightened. Alert. Elara looked toward the dark ridge. Something had changed. By sunrise, she understood what. A horn sounded from the lower valley. Then another. Royal hunt signals. Daniel arrived less than an hour later, his horse lathered with sweat. He did not dismount gracefully. He nearly fell. "Elara." She stepped outside. "What happened?" Daniel looked at Caelan, then back at her. Silas moved the hearing. Her stomach tightened. "When?" "Tonight." "That makes no sense." "It does if he thinks the king is still missing." Daniel pulled a folded proclamation from his coat. The emergency call decree had been approved for temporary enforcement. Founders' Night would go ahead as planned in Greyhaven. Hunters would surround the gathering. Any wolves approaching civilian areas would be killed immediately. Elara read the document twice. There wasn't supposed to be a vote until next week. There wasn't. Who authorized this? Daniel hesitated. Silas claims the contingency order already carried the king's approval. Caelan's growl filled the cabin. Daniel went still. Elara looked at the black wolf. Again, that strange feeling returned. Not an animal's anger. Recognition. Personal anger. She forced herself to look back at Daniel. Can he do that? He can if no one challenges the seal before tonight. Then challenge it. Daniel gave a tired laugh without humor. With what authority? Elara had no answer. They left the survey cabin within minutes. The evidence remained hidden beneath a loose floor stone. Elara took only her father's journal, the resin sample, and the rubbing from marker 12. The journey down the mountain felt wrong from the beginning. Birds had disappeared. Deer tracks crossed the snow in strange directions. Then Elara smelled it. Sweet, musky, prey lure, far stronger than before. She stopped. Caelan did too. Daniel looked around. What? Elara knelt beside the trail. Resin had been painted onto several low branches. Not enough for a person to notice without knowing the scent. Enough for wolves. She followed it downhill. Another branch. Another. Then another. A line. Leading toward Greyhaven. No, she whispered. Daniel understood. They're guiding them again. Not toward farms this time. Elara looked toward the distant town. Founders' Night. Hundreds of people. Children. Music. Food. A crowded square. Her blood turned cold. This isn't a cull. Daniel frowned. What? It's proof. Silas did not need another frightened report. He needed an attack everyone could witness. If wolves entered Founders' Night, no one would question the decree again. By afternoon, Greyhaven streets were already filling with lanterns. Elara reached the edge of town and saw royal hunt archers positioned along rooftops. Too many. They had prepared for something larger than a patrol. She moved through the rear alleys with Daniel. Caelan stayed hidden among the trees outside the walls. Elara hated leaving him there. She hated more that she did not understand why she cared. Near the eastern square, she found the first brazier. It looked decorative. Bronze. Carved with winter branches. But no ordinary fire burned inside. The smoke carried resin. Elara stared. Then found another 30 yards away. And another. Placed in a wide circle. Daniel whispered. They're surrounding the crowd. No. Elara's voice shook. They're surrounding the wolves' destination. Behind them, slow applause sounded. Silas Wren stepped from the passage between two buildings. 4 armed hunters followed. He looked exactly as Elara expected. Clean coat. Calm expression. Nothing about him resembled a man preparing a massacre. That was faster than I hoped, he said. Daniel moved in front of Elara. Silas barely looked at him. You disappoint me, Ranger. Daniel's hand went to his sword. Silas sighed. Please don't turn poor judgment into treason. Elara held up the resin-stained cloth. You changed the routes. Silas looked at it. No surprise. That frightened her more than denial. You planted the lure. Still nothing. You want them to run into the square. Silas finally looked at her. You should have stayed poor and invisible. Elara felt the insult land. Not because it hurt, because it explained him. He had never considered people like her capable of mattering. You hurt villagers. I gave frightened people clarity. You created the thing they were afraid of. I revealed what fear can accomplish. His eyes moved toward Moonpine. Greyhaven is starving itself to preserve a forest. For merchants. For roads. Jobs. Trade. For you. Something cold entered his expression. At last, she had touched the truth. Daniel drew his sword. Silas's hunters raised theirs. Then, a distant howl rolled across the hills. Every person in the alley froze. Another answered. Then another. Dozens. Perhaps hundreds. Silas slowly smiled. Too late. Elara turned toward the eastern wall. The scent braziers were already burning. The wolves had caught the trail. Founders' night bells began ringing across Greyhaven. Children cheered in the square, unaware. Archers lifted their bows. Outside the walls, the forest erupted with movement. Elara ran. Behind her, Silas shouted for the hunters to stop her. Daniel blocked the passage. And far beyond the eastern gate, Caelan Thorn stood at the front of a gathering pack, staring toward the city he ruled. For the first time all winter, he understood Silas's entire plan. The wolves had never been the target. They were the weapon. And Greyhaven itself was about to become the evidence. The first wolf reached Greyhaven before Elara reached the square. A scream rose near the eastern gate. Then another. Founders' Night had been built for celebration. Lanterns hung from windows. Long tables filled the streets. Children carried wooden wolf masks, painted silver and black. Now those same masks turned toward the walls as howls rolled through the darkness. Elara pushed through the crowd. Move! No one understood. Royal Hunt archers were already taking position. Silas had planned the timing perfectly. The braziers burned in a wide circle around the square, filling the cold air with a scent humans barely noticed. The wolves noticed. They came faster. Daniel appeared behind Elara, breathing hard. Silas's men are closing the north street. Then we open the old gate. What? The migration gate. Daniel stared at her. That hasn't been used in 18 years. It still opens. You know that? My father complained about its hinges every winter. Another howl cut through the square. People began running. A hunter shouted from the wall. Wolves at the eastern road. Archers raised their bows. Elara looked up. Don't shoot. No one listened. The first arrow flew. A wolf cried out beyond the wall. The sound tore through her. Silas wanted panic. Every arrow made the panic worse. Every frightened wolf became more unpredictable. Elara ran toward the nearest brazier. A guard blocked her. Stay back. That smoke is pulling them here. What? She grabbed the bronze stand. Heat burned through her gloves. The guard reached for her arm. Elara. Daniel slammed into him before he could stop her. Together they overturned the brazier. Burning resin spilled across the snow. For one moment, the scent weakened. Outside the walls, the howling changed. Not stopped. Shifted. They can still smell the others, Elara said. There are 6 more. Daniel looked toward the square. We'll never reach all of them. We don't have to. She stared north. We give them another path. They ran. Behind them, Founders' Night collapsed into chaos. Parents pulled children beneath tables. Merchants abandoned carts. Hunters shouted conflicting orders. Then Silas stepped onto the central platform. Hold your ground, he called. His voice carried above the panic. You see what they are. You see why the decree was necessary. Elara heard him. So did Caelan. Outside the eastern wall, the black wolf stood among dozens of restless bodies. Resin burned in his nose. Every instinct screamed toward the square. Food, movement, fear, prey. But beneath those instincts lived the mind of a king. Caelan fought every step. Around him, younger wolves surged toward the gate. He snapped at them, blocked them, forced them sideways. He could slow one pack. Not hundreds. Then he smelled something else. Barley, dried venison, wood smoke. Elara. The scent came from the north. Caelan turned. The old migration gate groaned. Elara and Daniel pulled against a frozen iron wheel that had not moved in nearly 2 decades. Again, she shouted. Daniel strained beside her. The chain jerked. Nothing. Elara wrapped both hands around the wheel. The healing cut across her palm reopened. Blood stained the metal. Again. They pulled. This time the mechanism moved. Slowly, painfully, the old gate opened toward the dark northern trail. Elara grabbed the food sack she had carried from Northwatch. She tore it open. Barley scattered into the snow. The familiar scent drifted into the wind. Then she ran. Not toward safety. Toward the open migration route. The first wolves saw her. Their bodies slowed. One turned. Then another. The black wolf broke from the eastern road and followed. The pack moved after him. Across the walls, archers hesitated. The charge toward the square bent north. Silas saw it happen. His face changed. Shoot the woman. The hunter beside him froze. Sir? She is redirecting them. There are civilians behind. Shoot. The man did not move. Silas grabbed the bow himself. Caelan saw him raise it. Elara did not. She was 20 yards beyond the gate, still scattering food, still calling softly to wolves that had learned her voice over an entire winter. Come on. Her breath shook. This way. The arrow left the string. Caelan ran. Elara heard the impact before she understood it. The black wolf slammed into her side. They fell together. For one terrible second, she thought he had attacked. Then she saw the arrow buried across his shoulder. No. Her hands went to his fur. No, no. Stay with me. Caelan lifted his head. Something inside him had finally reached its limit. The investigation was over. The evidence could wait. Elara could not. His body changed beneath her hands. Fur pulled back. Bones shifted. The great black wolf disappeared. A man collapsed into the snow. Tall. Scared. Bleeding. Naked except for torn remnants of a leather binding at his arm. Elara stopped breathing. Around them, the wolves went silent. Daniel dropped to one knee. Every royal hunt soldier who could see the gate froze. The man raised his head. Silver-gray eyes met Elara's. The same eyes. Elara, he said. She stared at him. You can talk. Despite the blood, something almost amused touched his face. So could you. Constantly. Her mouth fell open. Then Daniel whispered the words that shattered the square. My king. Silence spread outward. Silas stood on the platform, suddenly pale. Caelan rose slowly. Blood ran down his shoulder. He looked toward the archers. Lower your bows. Every weapon dropped. Silas stepped backward. My king, you don't understand. Caelan's gaze found him. Cold. Steady. Ancient. I've been watching all winter. The wolves gathered behind Elara. Not attacking. Waiting. And for the first time, the entire kingdom saw the truth Silas had tried to bury. The wolves had never marched on Greyhaven. They had been led there. And the poor Omega everyone had mocked had just saved both the pack and the people from the same lie. For several seconds after Caelan spoke, no one in Greyhaven moved. The wolves stood behind Elara in the snow. The archers held lowered bows. Silas remained on the Founder's Night platform, staring at the king he had believed safely absent. Then Caelan looked toward Daniel. Seal the eastern gate. Daniel rose immediately. Yes, my king. And no one leaves the square. Silas found his voice. You cannot mean to detain an entire town. Caelan looked at him. I mean to prevent the man who tried to turn my people into evidence from escaping among them." The words traveled through the crowd. People began looking at Silas differently, not as the official who had promised to protect them, as the man standing beside the braziers that had drawn wolves toward their children. Silas stepped down from the platform. "My king, whatever that Omega has told you, she told me very little." Caelan's voice remained calm. "I watched. That frightened Silas more." Caelan pointed toward the overturned brazier, "Royal Prairie Sin." Then toward the eastern road, "False migration markers." Then toward the archers, "Orders prepared before the wolves arrived." Silas shook his head. "Circumstantial." Elara slowly stood. Her hands still trembled from what she had witnessed. One moment, she had been holding a wounded wolf. The next, the Alpha King of Greyhaven had been beneath her hands. She was not certain which part of that realization she hated most. The fact that he had hidden it, or the fact that she had spent weeks telling her king things like, "Move your enormous head, I need that bucket." Caelan glanced at her. Something almost apologetic passed through his eyes. There would be time for that later. Daniel returned with 2 guards. "My king, there is something else." He handed Caelan a leather dispatch case recovered from one of Silas's officers. Inside were supply authorizations. Dozens of them. Caelan read in silence. "Royal scent resin. Issued repeatedly to Silas's department. Quantities far beyond any approved hunt." Silas's expression tightened. "Those records prove nothing." "They prove enough to ask better questions." Elara stepped forward. "My father's journal can prove where the markers should have stood." Caelan looked at her. "And the altered stones?" "Still there." "Good." Silas laughed once. "You will trust in Omega's dead father over the master of the royal hunt?" The insult landed badly. Not on Elara. On the people listening. Caelan's face became still. "I trusted the master of the royal hunt." He paused. "That is why we are standing here." Silas said nothing. By dawn, riders had been sent to secure Moonpine before anyone could remove evidence. Independent officers from the palace quartermaster inspected Silas's supply records. Daniel led them to the scent sites. Elara showed them marker 12, 14, 15, and the missing stone near 17. The evidence formed a chain no single excuse could break. Then came the final piece. Contracts. Eastmere Merchant Consortium. Silverstone survey rights. Timber access. Road construction. And beside each agreement, payment clauses activated only if Moonpine lost protected status. Silas Wren's private seal appeared at the bottom. When Caelan confronted him again, Silas no longer denied the plan. He defended it. "Greyhaven needs wealth." "Greyhaven needed honesty," Caelan answered. "You would preserve animals while northern families freeze. You endangered those families yourself." "For progress." Caelan stared at him for a long moment. Then he understood what made Silas dangerous. The man truly believed profit had made suffering reasonable. Caelan turned to the guards. "Take him." Silas's rank was stripped before sunrise. His commercial holdings were seized. The money later went first to families injured during the manufactured wolf attacks, then toward restoring damaged migration routes. Officers who knowingly falsified reports faced trial. Those who had obeyed questionable orders without understanding the conspiracy were investigated separately. Caelan refused collective punishment. Fear had already done enough damage. Spring came slowly to Greyhaven. Snow melted from Moonpine. The scent braziers disappeared. Old migration stones were restored. But Caelan did something no one expected. He dismantled part of the system he had built himself. Local trailkeepers regained authority to challenge royal hunt reports. No single office could again control every map, incident report, migration record, and enforcement order. When advisors protested that the change weakened royal control, Caelan answered simply, "It strengthens the truth." Elara was appointed keeper of the northern ways. She almost refused. "I argue with rocks." "So I have heard." Her eyes narrowed. Caelan made the mistake of smiling. "And," he added, "you apparently lecture kings while feeding them stew." Elara went completely still. "You heard all of that. All winter." She closed her eyes. This is deeply unfortunate. For the first time in years, Caelan laughed without restraint. Their relationship did not become a romance overnight. There was no sudden mating ceremony, no crown placed on Elara's head. Trust had taken a winter to grow. Love deserved at least as much patience. Caelan began visiting Northwatch without an escort. Sometimes they discussed migration maps. Sometimes Greyhaven. Sometimes Maris. Sometimes Elara's father. And sometimes they said almost nothing. The following winter, the first snow arrived quietly. Caelan reached Northwatch near sunset. Elara was standing outside with 2 bowls of stew. He raised an eyebrow. Expecting wolves? She handed him 1 bowl. Just one. Beyond them, a distant howl moved through Moonpine. Healthy. Free. Going exactly where it was meant to go. And as Caelan looked across the restored valley, he finally understood the lesson a poor Omega had taught his kingdom. Power could make people obey. Fear could make them destroy. But compassion made someone stop long enough to ask whether the creature everyone blamed had ever been the enemy at all. And this is where Elara and Caelan's winter finally grows quiet. If you're still here with me, all the way to this moment, thank you. Truly. What stayed with me most was never the crown, the wolves, or even Silas's betrayal. It was the way Elara carried herself when people misunderstood her. She was mocked, doubted, and treated as though her voice had no value. Yet she never begged anyone to believe her. She kept watching, kept thinking, and kept doing what she knew was right. Life can be like that too. Betrayal hurts. Being misunderstood hurts differently. And there are moments when the strongest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself, walk away from what keeps diminishing you, protect your dignity, and choose yourself again. You cannot control who lies about you, who disappoints you, or who refuses to see your worth. You can control what you become afterward. Elara chose dignity before anyone chose her. If that word means something to you tonight, leave just 1 word in the comments: dignity. And if this story kept you company, a like, share, or subscription would mean more than you know.